Okay, Erin, welcome.
Thank you. I grew up right here in Chautauqua County. Went to Faulkner Central High School, so I am a local.
Faulkner?
Faulkner, that's right.
Okay,
Yep.
and as part of that process, did you factor some of what your life skill sets would be in what you did at Faulkner?
Well, I will say that my connection in nature and my interest in the environment and sciences really sort of came from a couple different sources. I had some really great teachers at Faulkner, and I also had a really wonderful grandfather who was a game commissioner down in down in Pennsylvania, excuse me. And we were always going out on nature walks and identifying birds and trees and animals. So that was one of the things that I learned to appreciate at a young age, right here in Chautauqua County, in this beautiful area.
Then you left Faulkner High School, then where?
Yes, so I left when I was 17 for college. I went to Hiram College in Ohio, and I was actually gone for 17 years. I returned back to the area in my 30s. But my family is still here, my parents, my brother. I just completed my master's degree, and it was a good time to come back to this area.
What was your master's degree in?
Environmental management. That was at University of San Francisco.
You were also in banking for a while. How does what you're doing right now kind of tie in with that banking career?
Well, like every good biologist, when I got out of my undergrad degree, I went to banking. Don't we all do that? I fell into banking. I was in banking for 8 years. Worked my way up, was a senior personal banker by the end, and used that to get out to San Francisco, actually. But after 8 years in the banking industry, I thought, maybe I want to look into the science degree that I have, that I'm still paying student loans on. And I decided to go back to grad school, and I went and worked at a water lab in California as a lab supervisor.
So was there an aha moment when you're sitting in San Francisco and saying, aha, I would like to be in the environmental management world?
Well, I will tell you that in the banking years, that was just before the housing crisis. So it seemed like a good time to get out. But I've always purported to be more of a generalist. I think that a lot of different skill sets come into play, especially with this particular job. And I'm applying all of those things, my previous work experience, to this.
How did you find yourself in the position you're in today as executive director of the Alliance? And actually the full title is Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Management Alliance. And since you are the executive director, before we flip over to Pierre, can you just sort of give us the corporate background of how the Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Management Alliance, and we'll refer to that just as Alliance,
yes,
to make it easy, how did it kind of became where we are today?
Okay. So to give some historical context, there was a group called the Chautauqua Lake Management Commission, or the CLMC, which was an advisory commission to the county legislature. That commission was around for about a decade. They did a lot of work as far as bringing all the groups to the table. They did the current Chautauqua Lake Watershed Management Plan that was published in 2010. And they initiated the Chautauqua Lake Macrophyte Management Strategy, which is the in-lake weed management strategy. After a decade, this was an advisory committee, so there was quite a bit of research done, discussion, forward thinking, strategizing, and decided to take the route of forming a nonprofit that could represent all of these different groups, but also go after, really our focus initially was to go after outside money, to leverage our local resources and go outside and get grant money.
So this was really created by the Chautauqua County Legislature. What prompted that? At some point, was there, no?
It was not created by the legislature.
Okay, but how did it get created then? It was an advisory committee to the county.
It's not the Chautauqua Lake Management Commission that you're referring to?
Right.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. That was created by the county legislature.
So way back when, in the beginning, there was a Chautauqua Lake Management Commission, and kind of what precipitated that creation?
It's a little before my time, perhaps. Pierre might have some more insights as to the creation of the CLMC, because that was a good 15 years ago.
So it was an advisory committee to Chautauqua County Legislature. And what was their mission? Pierre, do you remember anything about that?
I was not involved at that point, Greg. I really don't have a whole lot of perspective on that.
Then it sort of sunset. right?
Correct. In 2014, it sunset after really looking into the research. How did they want to evolve? How could they best utilize our resources? And they worked as a group. So that CLMC was a group of different stakeholders from the different groups. It wasn't just county or municipalities. And there was sort of a core group of folks that worked together to form the 501c3.
So then they got the alliance created. What was its charge? What was the specific charge that they would have had as now a 501c3, separate and apart from the county, but it had a charge, and just for the benefit of everybody, can you give us kind of a general discussion of what its corporate structure was? Or is?
Our mission?
Yeah, mission.
Sure, absolutely. So, again, we were focused on bringing in those outside dollars. So we were formed to collaborate and coordinate amongst the stakeholders, think about how to prioritize amongst projects, how do we maximize our efficiencies and do the most bang for our buck, and to bring in those outside dollars. That was really the core mission initially.
So if I were to use a community foundation sort of model where, in fact, you were raising money, you were writing grants for the benefit of the lake and some of its affiliate members, and then you would pass that through and out to them?
So initially the vision was we would, and by the way, we're guided by general guidance documents that I mentioned. So the watershed plan from 2010, the macrophyte management strategy, those are two guidance documents. They're specifically in our mission. So we're looking to implement projects, member projects that fall within the parameters of those guidance documents. Initially we thought that there would be a real want of members coming with some project ideas or some developed projects and really looking for assistance in finding funding. Fairly quickly after we set up our membership and started having meetings, there wasn't a whole lot of projects that were being developed coming in. So we started going outbound. So we did a lot of project development out of existing studies. We've also had to do some additional studies so that we can go after grant monies. But we've evolved to really going from A to Z on projects regarding the lake and the watershed.
So
project development, grant funding, implementation.
So let's talk about that. The Alliance was a contributor to the development of the Chautauqua Lake Watershed Management Plan. Let's just refer to that as the plan. What is that, and how did that come into being?
Sure. So that was actually a CLMC effort. So prior to the Alliance, it was published in 2010, and this is an overarching guidance document on what are the things that you need to do within the watershed that affects water quality in the lake.
So that's the watershed. And did that ultimately that plan get DEC approval? Is there any blessing there, or is it just something that was agreed upon by this group?
This was a whole bunch of local stakeholders that came together, including an expert consultant that worked with them. But as far as DEC official sign-off, I'm not aware of them.
Okay. And then at the kind of corollary document that you work within is the Chautauqua Lake Macrophyte Management Strategy. And that is sort of the in-lake part of it, right?
Correct. So that's really focused. Macrophytes are the weeds. So the plants in the water. So we have the watershed plan. So what actions can we take within the watershed to affect water quality? And then you have the in-lake plan, which is really dealing with maintenance and use of that lake on an annual basis.
So I'm sorry to be, just sort of for the benefit of everybody, you got the Alliance, which is working off the two principal documents, the plan, which is the watershed plan, and you also then have the Macrophyte Management Strategy, which is sort of the in-lake plan. And you're writing grants, funding to come to you, and then find ways to distribute that to enhance those two plans.
Correct. So we're not necessarily distributing it. What we're doing is developing those projects, securing local match funding when we're going after state grants. There's oftentimes a percentage of that project cost that needs to be covered locally. Once the grant is awarded, then we come in as project manager and grant administrators and assist with implementing the projects.
So you'll actually help develop the plan with the stakeholders.
That's correct. So these grants are often, since we're a 501c3, we're not always eligible. Most of the times these state grants through these consolidated funding application or CFA process each summer oftentimes need municipalities as the applicant or other different groups. So Most of the grants that we've worked and the projects that we've worked, those grants are actually not under our name, they're under our member partners.
Gotcha. Pierre.
Hello.
Pierre, I was reading an article that was in the Chautauquan Daily, just to tie in this all together. July 18th, 2018, Chautauqua Conversations, column by John Ford, Shagnon, the man in the middle of Chautauqua Lake Matters. Full page, man, this is full page. And for those that did their research in anticipation of today. So tell us about you. You know, you're a native.
I'm a native. I grew up on Chautauqua Lake in the Driftwood area, south of Amos Point. Had a wonderful childhood. The lake was my nursemaid. I went off to college to Cornell University. Got my undergraduate degree in biology. Well, it's like coincidence there. Like all good biologists, after your undergraduate degree, you look for something else to do. So I went on, spent 2 more years at Cornell and got my master's in business administration and finance. Had secured a job in international finance when the family business, due to health reasons from the family, needed assistance, and so I came home to run the family business. Did that for a couple of years. Wound up closing that up and took a job with, at that time, TRW Bearings Division, which was the successor to MRC Bearings and the predecessor to SKF. So then I spent 31 years with SKF.
Your resume is many pages, and I wouldn't even begin to try to walk down this, but you clearly have a sense of community. And what is it that, is this something that has been inbred by your family, you know, your involvement, legislator, chairman of a variety of not-for-profits? What's driving you?
Well, Greg, I have led a very fortunate life, a blessed life. At a very early age, I was told repeatedly that to whom much is given, much is expected. And that's kind of been the beacon for my life. So I believe very strongly in giving back to my community, giving back to my fellow man. So I have dedicated a lot of my time and energy and efforts to community service.
And as part of that community service, you're in your 3rd term as a Chautauqua County legislator in the town of Ellery. And I think you took Vince's, when Vince ascended to becoming the county executive, you ran for that spot. And also then got involved with the Audubon and the Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Management Alliance. What did you know about them when were you there at the beginning of the formation of the alliance?
Greg, when Vince asked me to come to Mayville and play with him and be a legislator, I realized that the district that I would be representing was the town of Ellery and the town of North Harmony. And those 2 towns have roughly half of the lake shore of Chautauqua Lake. So it didn't take me long to realize that the lake had to be very high on my list of priorities. Actually, I placed it as #1 on my list of priorities. So I started spending time learning about all things lake, because I had been pretty distracted from my roots on Chautauqua Lake in my years of work at SKF. So I had the good fortune of spending time with some people who have been very active in the lake. A couple of them are in the room to this evening, who helped educate me and bring me up to speed with what was going on in the lake. At that time, the Chautauqua Lake Management Commission was still active. They were looking for a path forward. So I joined in some of those discussions, and I was one of the people that actually founded the Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Management Alliance.
So I read here there's sort of 4 people that decided to make that happen. Is that how that worked? Was this something at the Bemis Point Inn where you talked about it one day and said, let's make it a reality?
I wish it were that simple, Greg.
So to give us a little background, what was the genesis?
Well, my understanding at the time was that the Chautauqua Lake Management Commission was frustrated by the fact that they had no authority and they had no money. They spent a lot of time and effort creating a watershed management plan, and then they were hopeful in taking actions to implement some of the recommendations in that plan. And at the time, the county legislature decided that they weren't interested in funding any of those actions. So the commission was very frustrated that they had spent a lot of time and effort developing an award-winning plan, the watershed management plan, and they had no authority to implement it, and they had no money to take action. So they were frustrated, and they were looking for another way to help the lake, another means. And so when I got involved, they had started looking at different models, different approaches, and their wish was to be able to have a dedicated source of funding for the lake. So there had been discussions in previous years about forming a lake district. And so we took one more run at trying to accomplish that with the state representatives, and that didn't work out. So then we got serious about looking at other alternatives. And one of the alternatives that we came to was the Chagrin River Partnership in Cleveland, Ohio, that had been very successful in forming an, if you will, an alliance of stakeholders and generating grants from outside the area to help those stakeholders implement projects to help the Chagrin River Valley. So that was the model that we fell upon and that we used in the formation of the Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Management Alliance.
So you create the alliances, now you get the 501c3 status so that you can get contributions from foundations and get individual contributions if necessary, but you're at least an entity that can raise money. And you were successful in doing that. What was the pitch at the time? I mean, this is you're sort of de novo, you're brand new, you got a great idea, but still somebody's got to go out there and knock on the door.
The pitch was, and still largely is, that the concept is that this is an alliance of stakeholders around the lake. So our members are organizations that work in the lake and the watershed, such as the Chautauqua Lake Association and the Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy. It's also made up of members who have who are municipal entities, the towns and villages surrounding the lake. Also interested organizations that participate in activities regarding the lake, such as the Audubon Community Nature Center, the Roger Tory Peterson Institute, organizations such as that. So the concept was to form an alliance of stakeholders who had a common interest in helping the lake and the watershed to work together to the extent that they could collaborate. And really the strength of the organization is that when the alliance writes a grant request, this isn't a grant request from just the CLA or just the town of North Harmony or just the Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy. It's a grant request from the alliance. All of the members are now requesting this support, and the funding agencies, the grantors, look very favorably on those type of grant requests.
So I'm going to flip over to Aaron now, and Aaron, there is now a procedure in place where there are metrics, so that in fact an organization which has an idea, and they come to the alliance and say, gee, we'd like to do X, and we'd like you, the alliance, to help us develop the plan and to present it to a funding source, like the Sheldon Foundation, which I use that by name because they were the first to really use you for that purpose. How does it work? Can you kind of walk through that procedure?
So just to clarify, there is a bit of a separation in that effort to go after state funding. That was our major focus initially, and it remains a focus. We have evolved and added some additional tasks before us, which is one of those is the partnership with the local funders. A lot of times they were getting asks very piecemeal from various organizations. There wasn't a whole lot of scientific parameter questions in there, and they were struggling with how do we prioritize these projects. And prioritizing projects is a challenge, and it's in our mission statement. It's one that we wanted to help tackle. So this is more recent evolution with the foundations. And so what we should I go back to the 5-year? Maybe back to the 5-year. Back in I'm going to step back a little bit to give some context. So back in 2017, there was a lot of churning in the community, a lot of folks that were concerned about the lake, the conditions of the lake. And so we went after an effort to create a 5-year implementation strategy because we had this watershed guidance document, we had this in-lake guidance document. They don't really talk to each other. They do make an attempt to sort of prioritize amongst projects, but in a generic sort of way. So we wanted to take a look at those two documents and create an implementation plan and a way to prioritize amongst projects. So that strategy created what we're calling the multi-criteria analysis tool, or MCA tool, which is really listing the various criteria that you want to know about, that you want to consider when you're thinking about a project in the watershed or the lake, and assigning a scoring system to that. And then we have created a scoring team metric and an internal standard operating procedure, or SOP. We created a grant application template, and we put out a call to our members with that grant application template and said, please consider applying with projects that you'd like to complete for funding, and we are partnering with Sheldon Foundation and CRCF to hopefully get you that funding for those projects. So this was just fall of last year, so this is that was the first run at this new partnership and new process with the foundations and the local funding. We thought we might get a handful of project applications. We received 12 grant applications from our members, totaling a little bit over 1.1 million. So we use that multi-criteria analysis tool, but we also use some of the other parameters within the grant applications and answers that were put forth because the MCA tool is one tool. It doesn't replace logic. So we took a look at all those projects, and we've just recently made recommendations to local foundations to get funding on behalf of our members for some of those projects.
Let me just give it a for instance. The Sheldon Foundation, which is a foundation that said, we'd like rather than get grant requests from the myriad of not-for-profit organizations that are interested either in in-lake projects or watershed projects one at a time, we're just going to give a grant, set aside money to the Alliance. And then the Alliance, using this MCA schematic, multi-criteria analysis,
Yes.
thank you, tool to help them, and then you'll go through and you'll prioritize those requests. So they kind of come to you as a recommendation committee for Sheldon.
For Sheldon, CRCF, and perhaps Lene
Okay.
in the future. Correct.
So the foundations are using you in that capacity. I know I'm familiar with the CRCF. They have the committees which kind of review, vet, and then they recommend, and then ultimately the boards decide. So is that the same concept that's going on here with the Alliance? Is sort of you're a committee of those various foundations that have set aside money?
I wouldn't necessarily see it as that. I just think that this was, these foundations deal with various metrics in the community, not just lake and environmental issues. Their boards are challenged to understand the needs of all of those different areas in the community. And the lake is a complex topic. It's a complex science. So it makes sense to want to sort of put an entity in place that can look at the big picture, that has a science background, that builds off their actions from the guidance documents to help advise them on where the best place for your funding to go.
So I'm reading from an article that you provided to me. The MCA tool enables the Alliance to explicitly address the trade-offs inherent in prioritizing project opportunities. It applies decision criteria to evaluate a project, assign a weighting factor to each criterion, and allows users to score the criteria, and you've really got a category for watershed projects, some criteria for that. You've got some for in-lake projects, and then you have some for just general. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct, yes.
And then, bottom line is, then there's an article that appeared in the paper which said the Watershed Alliance rates projects and grant association requests. That's the end product?
Let's see. I didn't necessarily see this one, but yes, that is the recent, this last fall where we got the 12 applications and ranked them.
Yeah, I had to get this is the Jamestown Gazette because it had big print. That's the only it helps me. Okay. So, but then that becomes a recommendation to Sheldon, Community Foundation, and Lene, and then they in turn can make the grants.
So they'll make their determination, and then that funding will come to us, and then the Alliance will disperse those funds, do the contracts with our members, oversee the project limitation of the things that got funded.
Let me ask a question I know all foundations deal with is they give you money, they're delighted to assist in giving the money, and then the authority to enforce the actual grant itself. Do you guys do that? Do you do the follow-up, the follow-through? Will you do that? I mean, this is new, I know, but do you make ultimately a report the next year to saying, all right, we just encourage you, Sheldon, to give $100,000 to X, and a year later, do you actually report on what X did?
Right, so any grants that would be funneled through the Alliance, based on the recommendations that we've made that went to the community foundations and come back to us, we would contract with our members on those projects, and one of the requirements is a final report on the actions. But some of these projects are more programmatic in nature. Some of it is operational assistance to the existing lake organizations. And again, this is our first run at it, so we haven't received any of those reports, but we will. That is the goal and the vision.
To you, Pierre, you wear a couple hats as the Chautauqua County legislator and on various committees, including economic development and planning. I believe you're on that, or in charge of the purse. How are they involved with you folks at the Alliance? Are they a member? Is the county a member?
The county is a member, yes. And the county, in addition, is now flowing its money that went to the lake organizations in the past through the Alliance as well. So what has been described for the foundations with their lack of understanding of lake issues and the science of the lake, and what are the best priorities for the lake, is probably even more germane to the county legislature, because we have 19 legislators, and the vast majority of those 19 don't live anywhere near Chautauqua Lake and don't represent municipalities and towns that come close to Chautauqua Lake. So the frustration of the legislature in the past was, how were they to know that this organization that was requesting funding for the lake was the best investment for the county tax dollars? So the benefit that is being provided to the foundations is equally beneficial, if not more so, to the county legislature.
And again, so somebody makes an application, bed tax, okay, bed tax allocation, monies to assist various watersheds or lakes, whether it's throughout Chautauqua County, and they make an application. Will they then use your organization to assist in analyzing that?
Not at this point, Greg, because the 2% occupancy tax that is for the benefit of the lakes and the watershed has been pretty efficiently managed over the years by the Water Quality Task Force in terms of prioritizing the project requests that come forward for that funding. So at this point, that process is continuing as it has in the past. It is the direct funding that had been provided previously to lake organizations by the county. It's now flowing through the Alliance.
Is the Jackson Center one of those lake organizations? I just want to know.
It could be.
Marion, let's find a lake. Just kidding. Just kidding. You're the chairman of the board of the Alliance. Talk about your board members.
Wow. Let's see, none of them are present, so that gives me a free hand. The board structure is determined and is specified by our bylaws. The bylaws specify that the county executive will be a board member. The bylaws specify that, I'm going to get the numbers right.
So two county,
There are 2 county legislators.
well, so the county executive and the legislature,
And 1 legislator. Then it specifies
3 munis.
3 municipal representatives, towns or villages, and then 4 representatives at large. And our at-large representatives are selected from our member organizations.
Do they actually vote? I mean, so you have more members than board slots. How does that procedure work?
Well, that has been a point of some contention because not all of our, as you point out, not all of our members are represented on the board of directors. And we have staggered terms that rotate through. The objective is to have different organizations represented, different members represented, and we have had some degree of turnover in those representatives on the board in the last 4 years. So that process is a built-in irritant, if you will, to some of the members that don't feel that they're being effectively represented on the board. But it's the nature of an organization. We don't feel it's appropriate, we didn't feel it's appropriate when we formed the bylaws to have a board made up of 30 board members.
You mentioned earlier that one of the goals that was missing that then led to the alliance being created is not only fundraising, but authority to actually act and do something. Do you feel like in your 4 or 5 years that you've been in existence, you achieved that aspect of your goal, the authority aspect of it?
When we formed the alliance, Greg, we knew that we were not forming an organization that would have authority. And I don't believe that we have achieved any authority in the meantime. Part of the difficulty is that the authority, the regulatory authority for Chautauqua Lake doesn't reside in Chautauqua County, it resides with the state. So there is very little regulatory authority that can be gained locally for the lake. The watershed is a different story. The municipalities around the lake have a great degree of authority over the watershed. So that is an area that we have made no attempts to gain authority over the lake or the watershed.
Aaron, back to you. I always find this fascinating because of the business I'm in, lawyer, titles, lake beds, ownership, dock rights, all of those nifty things, and we kind of stumble on to ownership. Can you kind of sort out how the lake itself, this is the in-lake question, not the watershed question, who owns what, how the Army Corps of Engineers gets jurisdiction, kind of this jurisdictional aspect, where does the DEC come in, how can they come in? Help us through that title search work.
Well, the waters are owned by the state, as Pierre said, and the regulator that's really in charge of any permitting actions within that lake is the Department of Environmental Conservation, or DEC, which is in our region is Region 9.
So the state owns the lake, the water. Do they own the land underneath the lake? Is that how it all works? They must.
Yes.
They do. And they.
Chautauqua Institution would be the one exception to that.
Yeah, and they then in turn, the state has delegated that to the DEC to actually exercise the legal authority that they have on that lake. And at the same time, every once in a while, you'll see references to the Army Corps of Engineers. How do they fit into that? Is that yours, Pierre?
Yes, I can speak to that. Chautauqua Lake is designated as a navigable water, recognized by the United States as navigable water, and the Army Corps of Engineers has authority over navigable waters. A little trivia for you, Greg. Chautauqua Lake is at an elevation that places it at the second highest elevation in the continental United States for navigable waters. It's the highest elevation east of the Mississippi for navigable waters.
I read, just an aside, I put up on YouTube a 1996 series of programs by Channel 5 Access by John Lunsman. John Lunsman, and I highly recommend, I just put it up, so if you want to get sort of a big global view of Chautauqua Lake and the watershed from John's perspective, they did 11-part series, half an hour each. It's now up on YouTube. Have at it. Some of you may have seen it. But John talked about there's one spot outside of Mayville as you're heading towards Westfield where if a drop of water lands on one side of the road, it'll work its way into Chautauqua Lake and ultimately down to the Gulf of Mexico. If it's on the other side of the road, it works its way towards Lake Erie and then works its way out to the Atlantic. Trivia, what's the name of the road? Remember?
Yeah.
Anybody? Anybody remember? It's kind of...
It's our own little continental divide.
Yeah. It is kind of interesting. It's a fascinating, John. So you'll all have to watch it. And 2 weeks from now, I'm going to ask that question again. One of the questions you get all the time is we have all of these various entities that are stakeholders and interested in the sustainability and the enhancement of the lake for all the good right for all the right reasons, the end game. And the question is, where's the DEC in all of this? If they own it, why don't they manage it? What's your answer when that gets asked? Is this when you give it to Aaron and say, have at it?
This is the way Aaron and I don't answer that question. The DEC is in a regulatory role, and they have a very difficult job because they regulate far more than water bodies in New York State. So I know that there is a lot of frustration over people who take the view that if the state owns it, they should maintain it, and they should be responsible for it. I understand that view. I don't know that in my lifetime we're going to see much progress on achieving that goal. So that's not something that I spend much time or attention with, Greg.
In your membership are the Board of Realtors, the Chamber of Commerce, Chautauqua Institution, the Visitors Bureau, the Association, Fishing Association Partnership, utility districts, conservancies, the Chautauqua County, various foundations, Board of Public Utilities, various townships which border the lake. Are they active? Or maybe it's for Aaron. Go ahead.
Sure. So when this was first initially started, I think there was a memorandum of understanding amongst something like 7 or 8 entities. And when I came on board, taking a look at the mission and what we wanted to accomplish, I think that it was very important to try and gather as many members as possible. That was really a cross-section, a representative cross-section of our community. I think we all understand that everyone has a love and a concern for Chautauqua Lake, and everyone definitely has an opinion. And so we wanted as many voices at the table as possible. So we were actually really excited and really expanded the amount of groups. And when we went outbound on that first membership drive, we talked about the fact that we have an overarching mission and we should all be committed to that as a community. As far as membership services, some of those folks are getting direct member services, some are indirect. But I think that really speaks to the general community having understanding of the importance.
Let me ask back to the funding aspect of it. How do you get your funding? What funds your job?
Sure. So as far as covering our operational expenses, we very early on when it was being formed decided that we did not want to do fundraising for our own operational costs because we knew we would have fellow nonprofits as members. So that was a decision very early on. So our main revenue streams come from our membership dues that are collected annually. And we always appreciate all of the support of our members and their renewing of the membership during the drive. And then the other two revenue streams, one is some assistance through the county, 2% allocations, as Pierre had already mentioned. And then we're also earning our dinner to a certain extent. When we develop these projects and go after state grants, we write ourselves in for that project management grant administration services into the budget. So if a grant hits and we're able to assist our members in implementing that project, there's a percentage fee that we're collecting, and we do charge that as an hourly rate up to a maximum amount on each of these projects. So those are our three revenue streams.
Program management, membership of the various members.
Membership dues, county assistance, and then project management fees through our state grant project.
Are you subject to every year going to the county legislature and looking Pierre in the eye and saying, gee, can you set aside X amount of dollars? Or is that set because of the 2% aspect? Is that?
So we have lots of pots of money. So CLMC, that advisory group to the legislature, when it sunset, they did actually have some funds still unused, unspent, about $250,000 of that dollars. So what we did was suggest that money be set aside as a pot of money for match. So I talked about grants through the state. A percentage of that project is covered through the grant, and a percentage is covered through the local efforts. And when you're talking about bringing in those outside dollars, one of the biggest challenges that I discovered early on was that local match. So as far as the county money that was set aside for the local match, that's something where I would assist in writing a draft resolution that would go up before the two subcommittees and the legislature itself by project. So each year when we're looking to access those funds, we go before the legislature and ask permission to use those funds in that way, although it is earmarked for match. The other thing we did early on was, since we had these funds from the county, we also asked that the foundations think about setting aside match money. So we had these two pots of money that's really been utilized that way as far as match is concerned. And the legislature and the county should be given a lot of credit for supporting these projects and providing those local match dollars, because again, that is one of the big challenges, is bringing those outside dollars in.
Now, the fact that you are using your MCA analysis for the benefit of the county, Sheldon, Lene, and the Community Foundation, and probably more in the near future, that doesn't preclude an organization from going directly to other foundations. I mean, you don't put any restrictions on them when they have to come to you that it's only you. I mean, they can do whatever they want.
That's correct. We don't put any restrictions on it. Now, the funders have some preferences and would give instruction, but we don't put any restrictions.
And part of the local match aspect of, in fact, leverages it. So I know how when you apply for a state grant, it's often you'll get X percentage, which has to be matched someplace, either internally or externally. So it sounds like what you're able to do is actually go out and get additional grant money to cover that local match. And then in turn, that leverages money. I'm looking at a statistic you gave me here that in the 4 years your alliance has been, you've utilized $275,000 of match funds to bring in just under $3.7 million in state grants to our community, representing just over $5 million in total projects invested in the lake and watershed. Is that?
That's correct.
That's correct. You want to give a few examples?
Sure. So one of the we had success right off the bat. In 2015, we came on board, and you know, a lot of times when you're talking about state grants, you need a precursor. So it's that dreaded word, the study. But oftentimes studies are done in order to develop projects to the point where you can go after grant funding. So one of the recent studies that have been completed was an erosion mitigation study on Dutch Hollow Creek and Goose Creek. And we used that study to go after Water Quality Improvement Program, or WQIP funding, for six different grants at 7 different locations throughout the watershed and a number of towns. And we hit on all 6 of those. So we sort of hit the ground running on the state grants. So we have the stream bank projects. We've also partnered with the village of Celeron. They had their own local waterfront revitalization plan, or LWRP. that they were trying to get off the ground. So we partnered with them on removing the vertical wall at Lucille Ball Memorial Park and replacing that with rock riprap, graded bank, and a beautiful timber boardwalk and ADA compliant kayak launch. And some may ask, well, what does that have to do with water quality? What that has to do is public access. Celeron is one of the closest public access points to the lake for the largest urban center, which is Jamestown. So that was one of the projects. We've also been very invested in building pipelines with stormwater studies, urban stormwater studies. We partnered with the Village of Lakewood and the town of Bustye to go after a grant to do a stormwater engineering study. That was a grant we were awarded in 2016. We worked through that study, got a final report May of 2018. That report had 6 recommended projects that we brought to about 20% pre-design and an informed budget level with some visualizations. And that really is the precursor to going after that state grant money. So of those 6 projects, just this last summer, we went after funding for 3 of those, and all 3 of those received funding from the state here in December. So that, I think, speaks to that myth of not another study. Well, sometimes, especially when you're talking about outside funding and state grants and federal grants, you need to have some of that precursor work done, and that's that curse word study. But I think it gets a bad rap because there has been cases where studies have been done and it goes on the shelf and it's not implemented. But from the Alliance standpoint, that's simply the beginning of the pipeline, and we're walking that through the whole way.
So when people apply, I saw the big print, so I could read it again. Not everybody got their grants. I mean, when they apply for X amount of dollars, not everybody got grant. Who actually vets this? I mean, you're part of a process. You can have the process, but there are scientists, I'm sure, who look at each one. Explain how that works internally.
From the state grant system?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So under Governor Cuomo, they sort of did this centralized, consolidated funding application process where all the large pockets of money for the major grant programs throughout the state are all sort of packaged in the summer cycle, where they have X amount of dollars available, X amount of different programs, and a lot of different prerequisites and requirements on those different programs. So they issue about a 300-page report on what's available, and that cycle, that CFA cycle, typically opens May 1st, and you typically have until the end of July to finalize those grant applications. So once you finalize your grant applications, which takes the grant writing, but it's also the project development. Have you secured your local match? Who are your partners? What are the partners going to be doing? What's your scope of work? What are the outputs? All of those things go into the grant writing process, the project development. Once the grant application goes in within the system, the first place it goes to is Regional Economic Development Councils, or REDCs. I can't remember how many there are throughout the state. I think maybe 10 or 12. But our applications would go to Western New York, REDC, for initial review. That group applies 20% of the scoring for all projects that they assess. And then they do an initial publication of projects that receive the highest scoring. So the highest score is 20 points, the next tier is 15 points, and those are the 2 high scores that they do publish before any awards are announced. So you kind of get an inkling if you have a good chance. If you did well in the local regional scoring, it gives you a concept that you might hit on the state grants. So as far as where it goes from there, it depends on the grant type. So we have some being run through the DEC, or Department of Environmental Conservation. You have some going through the Department of State. You also have some going through Environmental Facilities Corp. So as far as who's doing the remaining scoring of those projects, it depends on the grant type and where that's being routed. But those expert organizations are doing 80% of the scoring and assessment. Once the scoring and assessment's done, they rank them and have a funding cutoff line per grant project.
And I noticed in the article here, there's references as these grants were evaluated, the ones that came to the Alliance, that there was a science committee, there was an outside third party called Ecologic LLC of Casanova. Kind of for the benefit of the camera, who are those guys, folks?
Sure. So you're mixing the two. So
okay. So the CFA, which is the CFA, and then there's the ones that come to you.
And then so the ones that come to us, that local effort. I apologize. The scoring was the question, right? Okay. So the criteria are defined. What each score means is defined. That's defined in the grant application itself, so our members understand how the projects are being assessed. In this first round, we thought it was very important to have sort of independent group scoring. So we had 3 different scoring groups. So Alliance staff was one group. Our science committee, the Alliance Science Committee, was another group. And then we did bring in EcoLogic, which is that outside consultant company that helped us with our 5-year strategy and created the MC tool with us. 3 of their experts also did scoring. So we had about 10 different individuals receiving the grant applications from our members, using the worksheets and the defined criteria, scoring and making any assumptions, commenting, making sure that they made notes on any assumptions. Those scores were combined and ultimately came up with rankings of the projects.
And if you ended up with 0, what's the appeal process? Anything?
Well, again, this was our first run at this just last October.
So,
Just a couple of months ago.
Other than calling Pierre, what is the appeal process?
I'll give him your number, Greg.
Yeah. Well, this was your first experience. What was your, either of you could answer this, what was your sense of it all? I mean, it comes out in the paper, here it is. And then did you get feedback? I wouldn't say blowback, feedback?
Well, we put this together in very short order because the foundations were really interested in launching this year very quickly. So we didn't have a lot of time to put this together. Our staff did a wonderful job of bringing this whole process together. They created an application that may be influenced by the complications in state applications, which are very complex. So we put out an application form to our members that our members found pretty confusing, pretty complicated, as opposed to the grant application forms that they were accustomed to from the foundations. And we didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of education, a lot of helping them through that. So the criticisms that we got was that we dropped on them a grant application form that was pretty complicated and rather confusing. So we are now committed that as this next year unfolds, we are going to go back and revisit that, gaining the advice and input from our members as to how we could make that application form better. That's the basis of the concerns that we received. Initially, we had some members who said, there's no way, we can't do this. We can't fill out an application form. We can't possibly do this. And we were starting to think, gee, will we get any applications? And in the end, we got 12 applications from our members for funding. Not everyone was of the highest quality application that was filled out at the highest level of quality. We understood that. We knew that. The staff worked with the members to the extent that they could help them with the application forms, but we ran the process this year. We got through the process this year, and now we're going to take the time to learn from what we did and improve it going forward.
You've been at this, Pierre. You're a founder of the Alliance. It's now 4 years experience. As you reflect back, kind of what are the achievements that you're most proud of, and maybe some of the challenges you're looking towards?
Greg, I'm glad you asked that question, but I was sitting here thinking how I was going to get this out. But when we formed the Alliance, like I said, we modeled it after the Chagrin River Partnership. The Chagrin River Partnership formed with a handful of members, and they literally went a couple of years before they got any grant funding. They were successful in any of their grant funding. So we had low expectations when we formed the Alliance. We were very conservative. We hired one staff member, who happens to be sitting to my right, and we didn't really expect that we were going to have a lot of members. And Aaron was successful in recruiting a very long list of founding members, far more than the Chagrin River Partnership started with, and we were delighted with that. And then Aaron spent a lot of effort in writing 6 grant applications, and honestly we thought, well, okay, that'll be this year, and next year maybe we'll be successful on something. She hit 6 for 6. We got 6 big grants awarded the first year. And then we all looked at each other and went, oh my God, what do we do now? So our biggest difficulties have been dealing with our successes, dealing with the growth that we achieved. So looking back, the one thing that I would have done differently, I would have had more optimistic expectations and planned better for success.
And Aaron, I'll let you get the tougher part as you look into a crystal ball 5 years from now. What do you see as the opportunities and perhaps the challenges? I mean, there are a number of organizations, as you said, Pierre, probably more than you, they exceed your expectations as far as members, but they all have their views and aspects. And what are some of the challenges for you? Because you're essentially an umbrella organization.
We are an umbrella organization, and you know, we've had a lot of successes in a very quick time, and frankly, I don't see that pace reducing. You know, not only did we focus on that initial mission, but we've already started evolving and assisting funders locally. So I don't think that this is a forever growth. Part of what we want to do is support our service members, the folks that are out there doing the work, that have been doing the work in the lake and the watershed for decades. So I'd like us to get to a point where we're maximizing what we can do, but I'd also like to see us long-term make sure that we're lifting these other organizations up and adding value to them as well over time.
So that's an aspiration. What's the challenge at this point?
Well, I think that I think we can all understand the challenge is that there's multiple different perspectives about what does it mean for a healthy lake? What are people's expectations? What are their priorities? What's important to them? Is it fishing? Is it going out on their boat? Is it simply looking at an overlook and looking at a beautiful ecosystem? The challenge is that balance, the balance between all of the different perspectives, but also the balance of the complexity of the science.
I'm going to go you at the end, Pierre, to sort of give you the final word, but is there a question that you were expecting tonight from me, Aaron? As we've seen each other. By the way, our offices are near each other at the BWB building.
I never see him.
Yeah, all of a sudden, oh God, here he comes again. But you were expecting me to ask that I should have asked?
Not thus far. And I'm not going to give you any ammunition. You have to come up with your own questions.
Yeah. So, but let's go back to a message. We're going to try to wrap up fairly soon here. The Aaron Brickley Executive Director message. You've got a few minutes here, and the camera is on, and you're saying, "I want to give a message to the world."
To our local community, at least.
Yeah.
I will say that you hear a lot of different things. There's a lot of different discussions. Everyone has an opinion. But there is reason to be positive. All of this discussion just means that everyone has an understanding of the importance of the lake and cares and is passionate about it. There's been a lot of movement. We've gotten a lot of projects funded. We're evolving as an alliance. There are every single one of our projects has multiple partners involved. So I'd like to sort of tell you that this concept that no one's working together is a bit of a myth. There are some topics that are controversial, that do sort of polarize people, but as an overarching statement, understanding all of the things that go into watershed and lake management, most of these projects are being done in collaboration and coordination amongst each other, and I think we all should take heart in that.
I'll explain that to Dixon and Geis, okay? Pierre, you're, again, chairman of the board, written up as the man in the middle of Chautauqua Lake. Clearly, you're the epicenter, you're the loci of all of this stuff. So tell us your hopes and dreams and maybe what you would like to see.
Well, Greg, I was just speaking this morning to a group of people and talking about really building on what Aaron just said, is that in my life on Chautauqua Lake, this is an exciting time for Chautauqua Lake because there's so many good things that are happening. There are several sewage treatment plants on the north end of the lake that 5 years ago were making no attempts to remove phosphorus from their effluent. Their effluent contained all the phosphorus that they were bringing in was passing right into the lake. Today, all of those sewage treatment plants, including the state-of-the-art treatment plant at Chautauqua Institution, are removing in excess of 90% of the phosphorus from their effluent. That's a dramatic change, and a dramatic change to the nutrient loading of Chautauqua Lake that has occurred in just the last few years. The South and Center Chautauqua Lake Sewer District is now extending public sewers up the west side of Chautauqua Lake from the area of Asheville-Boces up through the hamlet of Stowe. That's something that area has been without public sewers since we built the initial system of public sewers in the 80s. So there's that going on. We've got the Alliance bringing in grant money into the community. We've got the foundations more focused on being supportive of the activities in the lake and the watershed. We've got the lake organizations doing good efforts, good projects, bringing new technology to the challenges that face the lake. The Chautauqua County has just joined a newly forming collaboration of freshwater lakes across New York State to try and bring more attention to the challenges and the needs of the lakes in New York State. We're pursuing a lake district. All of these actions, all of these activities are things that are aimed at helping our little lake. And so these are all exciting things that are going on. And sometimes I feel like I'm in the center of the storm and it's all swirling about me. But these are exciting times. There's so many exciting good things going on and so many people talking about the lake and concerned about the lake that I couldn't be happier to be in the middle of the storm right now.
Thank you. And I think it's important to state that a guy like Pierre Shagnon, as are many people who are behind these various members, are volunteers. These are people giving their community service, their time, their energies, and they all are to be complimented. But specifically, I want to compliment both of you for spending your time tonight here. And Aaron, Pierre, on behalf of all of us, thank you for coming.
It was an honor.